And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter series. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting closer and closer to that beloved time of year that is footy season. And to help us get there, this particular off-season, I thought let's talk to some Americans and international fans to find out why they love this beloved game and why they love their particular club. And joining me today, a man I know very, very well, and sometimes I think he doesn't want to know me very, very well when it comes to fantasy football, because this guy really has had some fun times with me playing fantasy football, but a very good friend of mine joining us from Carolina. We have Lee. Lee, great to see you, sir.
Thanks for Donnie. Appreciate it. Always coming in second to you. That's the old adage is that I'm the bridesmaid and never the bride.
I am the Stephen Bradbury of two finals series that, trust me, Lee has had plenty of choice words for me on a couple of those. But hey, you know what? We have a lot of fun with it. We have a good group that we play fantasy football with. In fact, we are organizing it ourselves here really, really closely. Our draft day is coming up closer and closer. Cannot wait. Let's jump right into it, Lee. Before we hop into the footy, let's find out just the littlest bit about you, just the littlest bit. So, a little bit about you outside of the game of football.
Well, I'm from Eastern North Carolina specifically, so my that is my stomping grounds, and I'm a graduate of East Carolina University, right in the heart of Eastern North Carolina. So everything East Carolina sports have been since I was knee high to nothing, and I've always been full purple all the time. So even my high school was purple. And the Tarboro Vikings were purple. So I've had plenty of purple to go around in my life, and it's just part of who I am. Also being the underdog, East Carolina is not a prominent NCAA school. It's not in a prominent conference. But we are what we lack in stature, we make up for in volume because we are loud and
I
we
love
are
it.
obnoxious. So
Be
that's
proud of
that's
it.
just how it goes. You embrace the pain is essentially how that goes. And for East Carolina fans, it's a good time of year because tomorrow baseball season starts, and literally that's one of the sports that we love more than any, is that baseball time of year. And for all for all of the talk about football, the coldest season of any is college baseball season. There's
Hmm.
nothing colder than that.
I'm not
At
going to
least in
disagree with you.
in basketball, at least you get to play indoors. You can't
Hmm.
do that for baseball.
Yep, no, completely get that. So I'm fascinated on this because again, Americans and international fans, you have to find the story. The story is always so much fun. So I love asking this question. You, sir, the East Carolina nut that you are, how the heck did you find footy? What is your finding footy story?
Uh, Twice. I found footy twice, believe it or not. And I'll
Okay.
start with the most recent one because it kind of leads up to a better story if you follow it that way. But the pandemic was really where I dove in with both feet. Really, there was nothing going on here in the States, and all of our sports, shut down. I never cared about basketball, but basketball wasn't going on. They even halted March Madness in its tracks. There was no March Madness that year. No NCAA championships. Baseball was out. No hockey. It was just completely nothing in North America in terms of sports. But then who was still playing in March? AFL was still playing, or they were still trying to anyway. They did get one round in, and then they had to call it off. Apparently, there were enough of the COVID cases where they had to shut it down. And of course, Australia, you know, and I'm taking that a lot of your listeners out there do come from Australia, know that there was lots of lockdown and keeping everybody else out that managed to get that game back going again. And really, I enjoyed getting back into AFL then, and I really felt like that I had to find a team. But actually, it started in the mid 80s when the old VFL,
Mhm.
which was like AFL 1.0, Fitzroy and Footscray and of course still Collingwood and Melbourne and all the traditional um, teams from Victoria, Geelong, others like that, all part of the Victorian League. They played on ESPN back before ESPN was the worldwide leader in sports. They were the worldwide leader in ping pong and
Mhm.
shuffleboard and whatever they could find to put on because the big three networks in America were still dominating all of the college and pro sports, and they just got whatever they could get to fill the time for
Mhm.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And one of those was VFL football, and it came on at 5:45 on Saturday morning. And I woke up one morning and watched this thing and I thought, this is the craziest damn sport I've ever seen.
Mhm.
And it was like these guys have to have the stamina of soccer players, the physicality of football players, and the ability to play both ways like hockey players. It was amazing to me to watch this game just free flowing back and forth for 4 quarters. I mean, they have 3 periods in hockey at least, and you have all this protection on you. These guys are banging on each other and they got nothing. I mean, you couldn't even run out there for all of that speed with a cup on. It's just amazing the amount of physical endurance that you have to play that game. So I'll go ahead and beat you to the next question. No, I've never played it in my life, and I never will. Just looking at it makes me want to just vomit because I know that that's what I would do if I tried. Ah, here's my daughter. Good night, daughter. You get to catch a very touching moment here. Sorry for all of those folks on the audio podcast, but my daughter telling me good night.
Oh, it is adorable. That is absolutely awesome. And actually, you jumped one question because my next part is favorite part about the sport of football because I know with many of us Americans, there's always a different thing. So interested, what's your favorite part about the sport of footy?
Oh, I guess it's uh, you never know. It doesn't seem like there are times when the game's just not over until it's over.
Mhm.
And I think my favorite aspect of the game is when we go after the siren. When the clock is off and there's everything on the line and everything to play for in just one kick. It's when you watch soccer, penalty kicks, at least the other guy is going to get a chance after you make or miss. But when you're kicking after the siren, you're talking about win or lose, one person literally being the hero or the GOAT. How amazing is that for a real sports moment to happen? And it literally happens every season on an AFL field. It's amazing to watch.
Yep. It's one of those great parts of the sport that's always fun is that you do have that after the siren almost buzzer beater like walk off in baseball type of thing, which is always brings so much excitement. So as you said, you got into the AFL, which is the reason why you got into the sport. So we'll jump right to it. You've given us a couple of clues by a few things that you've said, but I'll make you say it out loud for those that are watching the podcast. Who is your club in the AFL and why?
Well, it would have to be the Fremantle Dockers. And I was a bit smitten right from the beginning just because of the purple, but it was actually a little bit between them and Adelaide Crows at the very beginning because they are both kind of at this point underdog stories. But Adelaide has had some success in the past, but Fremantle has been a long struggling club, It reminds me a whole lot of my East Carolina Pirates, just constantly fighting for respect and being outnumbered by other people, the blue bloods of Tobacco Road that think that they're so much better than everybody else. Kind of reminds you of that West Coast Eagle kind of vibe, you know, down on little brother, just constantly giving them the business because they haven't gotten all the premierships that the Eagles have. And so it really that that part of it kind of appealed to me. But there was actually one game that I was watching during that period where AFL had shut down. I actually got watch AFL for I think it was $6 a month. They were doing anything to try to keep interest while the break was going on. So I bought this. I bought it at the cheap international rate at the time or whatever. And one of the games that they showed on Fox Footy was a game from 2005 where the Dockers were playing St. Kilda, and Justin Longmuir got a mark about 35 out,
Mhm.
and it was an after the siren kick. And there's 38,000 fans at Subiaco Oval just literally staring and hoping and staring and hoping that this guy's going to put it through. And literally, as the ball rises, the fans go with it because they see he slotted it and they just go nuts. And literally, the only thing about that call that I hated, ah, the commentary, the damn commentary. I swear to God. You've got Dennis Cometti and all these people that know how to do it right. Why in the world do you let Eddie McGuire mess up a good thing? He sat there and talked over that entire moment where fans were going crazy and the players were jumping into the stands and
Mhm.
he would not shut up. Just let me hear this exciting moment that's happening. But no, Eddie needs to hear Eddie while all this is going on. So that's the only thing about that moment that bugged me. But that was the moment where I realized these are my people and I need to be part of this.
That is a fantastic story. I know that one of the videos that I got into AFL, that particular call is in there. And as you're going through it, I'm literally listening to it in my head, and I'm like, "Yep, everything that you said is absolutely perfect." What an incredible memory on that, and the fact that now Justin Longmuir is now the head coach of Fremantle makes it kind of this great full circle moment on that. So let's jump to it. We discussed this just before we came on mic, so I cannot wait to ask this question because I love asking this. The first Fremantle Dockers item that you were given or bought, I know that this is a pride and joy for you and also a fun story. So you got to tell us, Lee, the item that you first bought or were given that's connected to the Dockers.
Well, when I became a Dockers fan, I'm like, okay, I have to understand the history of the club because I know I'm behind. I even knew I knew more about Fitzroy at that point than I knew about Fremantle. All I knew is that I need to find out what all of this is about. What have these people gone through the years? So I was told, and of course, my only real lifeline to what goes on in in the Frio universe is Twitter X. So those were my people for a while, basically kind of guiding me through all of this. And they're saying, well, there was a book written by a guy named Matt Price. Sorry. Matt won't get too mad at me for mispronouncing his name. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But he wrote a book about the first 9 years of Fremantle football called Way to Go, Sadness, Euphoria, and the Fremantle Dockers. Now, a guy in Perth, Australia, paying homage to Billy Joel's Summer Highland Falls lyrics by calling on sadness and euphoria. I'm like, okay, I'm liking this guy already. But this book has apparently been out of print for some time. I mean, it was first printed in 2003. And I'm trying to come along in 2020 and come up with it. And most Docker fans, if they have a copy of this book, they're hanging on to it like Christians hang on to Bibles. They love this thing and certainly don't want to give it up. So I had to go full on eBay or wherever I could find these online used bookstores, wherever I could find it. I was trying to look for copies of this book. Well, I got lucky and I managed to get a copy of it on eBay. Um, they had to ship it from Australia, which
Hmm.
was crazy, but because I'd never seen postage that high for a book before. I've
Hmm.
learned that getting anything from Australia, the postage is going to be high, but I digress. That's just part of being international fan, but I get it.
Hmm.
So I got the book. It's right here. Way to go. Sadness, Euphoria, and the Fremantle Dockers. And so I was really enjoying this book, and this was the year after the pandemic started. So I'm on my back deck in the summer reading this book. So happy that I got my hands on this copy of this book. And I was halfway through the book, and I set it down on the armchair outside of my Adirondack chair, and I went in for something and I forgot about it and I left it there. And I came out the next day and it had rained the afternoon and this book was still literally soaked. So if you can see it on camera, there's literally mildew marks all over the inside pages of it, and it's just crinkly, really, really stiff pages. It's hard to flip through. It's hard to read because the lettering is uneven because the pages are uneven. But so I'm like, oh man, I just killed this book. I've been looking for it for so long, and now I got. So it took me another year, but I managed to get me another brand new copy to put on the shelf.
Love
But
it.
I did finish reading the old weathered, literally weathered first version that I got. So somehow I managed to get two, and I'm hanging on to them because they're treasured items for me because that's kind of where it started.
There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely love it. He told me that story just before we came on mic, so I had to get him to tell it that because I love that. I love that passion. In fact, it's actually a great transition into the next question because as I tell a lot of people, fandom is different. Fandom for every single person is different. Nobody will fan exactly like the next one are, and especially being international fans where it adds a whole degree of difficulty because we're watching a sport thousands of kilometers away from us. So I asked this of you, sir. Describe your fandom of Fremantle because I know, like I said, everybody's is different. So what is yours? Are you up and watching them live? Are you watching them on delay later with through the Watch AFL app? Kind of describe your fandom of Fremantle for me.
Yes, I'm up in the middle of the night watching them.
I
I'm
love it.
watching replays the next day of it. I'll go to my dad's house and I will play replays on his TV and force him to watch the replay, especially if it was a good Fremantle win. If we lost, then maybe I'm a little hesitant about going back and doing the replay for dear old dad. I'll do it for my own purposes later on. One of the one of the things about my fandom um, is not only am I just a fan of this team, but I'm also still really learning the finer points of the game. And having grown up in the United States, you and I, Donnie, know the real intimate details about American football and the schemes and all that, and basketball and baseball and all the sports that we've grown up with all of our lives. This is You're seeing these grown men that have played this game literally since they were tots. They know the games like we know our games. I'm looking at them like, how did they know that was going to happen? They're playing so instinctually out there, especially the best teams are playing just instinctually like they know exactly what the other guy's about to do, and they can just read body language and kind of tell. So I'm constantly learning about the intricacies, not just of what they're trying to do, but what they've learned through the years when they've gone up from you know Oz kick right up to the big time. All of that is stuff that I'm constantly trying to learn. So you go in and you watch these games and you rewatch these games and like, man, that was a good play. I didn't see that the first time. Man, that was really cool. Ooh, he's really having a good game. And if my dad were to watch that game, he would know that Luke Ryan was having a screamer because he's just a backman who's just catching the ball or he's getting lucky or whatever, and he's
Mhm.
always there. That ain't luck, my friend. These people know exactly what they're trying to do, and the best succeed at it a whole lot more often than they fail at it. So it's, while I love my team and I do, I'm trying to also be a student of a new game. And that really, like I said, I would never play the game, but it really helps to talk to other Docker fans about footy if you know what the hell you're talking about. Because that's the one thing I don't want to be is the stupid American who has no idea what he's seeing.
Yep. And that's one of those that it's always fascinating because when I talk to Australians, the biggest thing is that I think they just love that somebody's actually interested outside of Australia. They're fascinated by you, but if you show a common knowledge, like at least a good amount of knowledge, they respect you. So it's like, especially for guys like you and I, who, like I said, we sit down, we watch the game at least once or twice over the year, and then I know with like Craig Wessels, a good friend of ours, he'll watch every single game, every single minute if he can. And
Yep,
so it's one of those that he dives into it. So I think guys sometimes like that, they earn the respect of Australians to be able to speak with the way we do. So but that's the kind of the fun part is that this is, as you said, it's such a fascinatingly different sport because it is nothing we've ever seen. And you can't help but compare it and go, well, it's got this and this and this and this. So it's absolutely fascinating. So 100%, I love that about you. And the fact that you get your dad to watch it is absolutely magnificent. I just had it, my Collingwood supporter who I talked with a little bit, that should be coming up just before this one. He's got his wife interested in it. So I love when you can get other people in and around your family. That's fantastic. So as we know, Fremantle doesn't have the longest history, at least not compared to some of the VFL teams or some of the like
absolutely.
The Port Adelaides because of the early part of the Magpies here. So I'll just ask this: do you have a favorite player of the past that you've looked into from Fremantle, and do you have a favorite player currently on the Dockers list?
Um, does Lockie Schultz count as the past? I think it does.
I'll let
Oh
you
my
have it.
well, I mean, there are a lot of you have to look back at the past. Guys like Luke McFarlane and Pav, they're you know Clive Waterhouse. Some of the videos of that guy were just crazy. I mean, he was literally the embodiment of sadness and euphoria. It's one or the other, but you never knew what you were going to get sometimes out of those old Dockers players, and that kind of was what made a lot of them such legend. But I'll jump back though to Lockie Schultz because when I first started watching, that guy to me just seemed like he was everywhere. He would take the hard road to get there as well. And he reminded me he had these huge forearms and just big, thick legs. And he reminded me a lot of Popeye, the Sailor Man.
Mhm.
So I literally took to calling him Popeye because I really thought that he looked like Popeye. So whenever he would score a goal, I was literally putting um, images on Twitter X of olive oil blowing kisses to Popeye. Literally, I love the guy, and I think he's just the most wonderful thing, and he's just great. And then last year requests a trade out, and it was just the most heartbreaking thing. And it seems like it's just the Fremantle way, though, to fall in love with a player and get invested in them, and then suddenly realize that they've checked out, they've requested a trade somewhere else. And it's the classic old, they're not as into you as you are into them. And it hurts. But, Collingwood fans, I guess that's something that they'll never know because people literally aren't running away from, you know, that or, some of the larger teams in Melbourne because that seems to be where a lot of those guys end up. They want to go to where football is the biggest and the MCG playing there every single week is kind of the biggest stage for AFL football. But it's hard when you're a Fremantle fan to see um, these football players that you love and you want to invest in, and then suddenly the big lights of the bigger game in Victoria, draws them away. And
Hmm.
it's been heartbreaking to hear some of their stories, some of the investment that they put in, and then see these guys go away. So I've had mine,
Hmm.
and I know how they feel because Shuda was my man, and I hated to see him go.
Hmm. Yeah, never easy, never easy. I know that be definitely interesting, definitely interesting. I've seen a fair few come and go from so many different teams. So 100% with you. So let's jump to it. I'm interested on this because if you would have asked me 3 months into the season, I'd have said Fremantle was definitely a team that I could see making finals. Your thoughts on last year? Because unfortunately, the end of the year was a little bit anticlimactic compared to the way the season was going there for a while.
Totally agree. It was classic Frio. It was classic. Uh, it's just amazing to see how they just fell apart at the end. Now, granted, the schedule didn't do them any favors. They had a murderer's row at the end of 4 games,
Hmm.
but you gotta win one of them. And unfortunately, the injury bug had kind of caught up with them at that point, and the teams they were playing were starting to peak. They were, they even Hawthorn was one of those that really was coming on like a tear late. It looked like early in the season like Hawthorn might be a good win at that point, but at the end of the season, you just look like no, no, I just don't think that they've got it for them, and they didn't. So it was really disheartening for all of our Frio faithful to see that disappointment once again. When we really felt like we had it in our hand. We were literally sitting top top four at one point, and then it all just fell away. And it
Hmm.
it it I mean nothing hurts more than to feel like we've got it. It's right there, and then all the cards just collapse. And that's just unfortunately it's kind of a staple Frio. You know, the Frio faithful they know they're familiar.
Hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, and they were one of those that I watched them during the season. That was like they've got the team that could really cause a lot of damage if they get to finals. And as I agree with you, the murderer's row at the end, where just you literally caught everybody's best shot at the worst possible time. So it really
Hmm.
was frustrating as somebody who I wanted in just because I thought Fremantle was going to be a headache for so many teams if they got in. So I'm 100% with you on that. So let's jump right to it. Since we are getting closer and closer as we record this, we are less than 30 days away from the opening round. So, your thoughts on this upcoming year because Fremantle made some moves. Did they give themselves the hump to get into finals? Can they compete for a flag this year? Or is making finals going to be at least the expectation?
I think it is the expectation. However, as you're seeing early in the preseason, unlike in years past, there's a bit of an injury rash that's going on this season. Um, Sean Darcy is not going to start week 1. He's had a bit of a setback with his foot, and so he had he had an infection that kind of flamed up, so they're going to have to hold him out early in the season. And we just picked up Shea Bolton, and now he's got you know nagging injuries. Um, Hayden Young, he also stretched a hammy as well, and Pierce as well. So, El Capitan may not be 100% coming in, and that's one of the things that you just know if you don't have a healthy preseason coming in, a lot of these guys are going to end up week 5, week 6, week 7 before they are finally like in a groove. And in years past, Frio's been able to get a fast start because they have not had injury bugs, but this year I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, do they have depth? Yes, they do. But I've always akin depth to, in any sport, it's potential energy that you need to change to kinetic energy.
Mhm.
These guys are waiting in the wings, but they have to do their job. They have to take a spot from somebody. So if you still see Nat Fife and Michael Walters at the end of the season in prominent roles, I think that's likely a sign that this team has once again underachieved.
Mhm.
I think the idea is some of that depth needs to work Nat Fife and Sonny Walters out of these spots. I love those guys. Don't get me wrong. But the only way that this team is going to get better is if you get some of those depth players to overtake these guys that are literally in the twilight of their career. That's what you have to do to be a good football club overall. There aren't very many David Mundys that can be there and be effective for years and years and years. And right now, Sonny and Nat are both very injury prone during the season. They're not going to be full-time contributors anymore the way they once were. So you really need somebody to step up and be that 22 game man that's going to take over and leave those guys in the dust. So that's
Mhm.
that's the kind of if you're going to play in professional sports, you have to kind of resign yourself to the fact that you're kicking an old guy to the curb usually.
Yeah, it's one of those that if you can keep them to a minimum to where they can be the freshest that they possibly can become finals time, that's the best. But we'll have to see. The only thing that I'll sit here and say this is that if you have the injuries in the preseason, that means that usually if trends go the way they do, come the end of the season, then you're usually your healthiest. You usually I saw last year, like you look at the Sydney Swans last year, that they jumped out to that great thing because they had no injuries. But then they started getting injuries towards the end of the season and it started throwing off their form. So I'm almost one of those. If you're going to have injuries, at least have them in the preseason because then by rounds 5, 6, and 7, usually, hopefully, cross your fingers, nothing too long term, you're going to get most of your guys back when you start hitting the heavy part of your schedule. So I'm 100% with you. I agree that if Nat Fife and Sonny Walters are impact players on the team, that's not a good trend. You want to see some of these youngsters being much more of the impact players. So I'm gonna have a little bit of fun since you and I play fantasy footy. I know that you have quite the fun knowledge of players. I'm gonna ask you this. For one day, I'm going to install you as the list manager at the Fremantle Dockers. All of the 17 other clubs have basically opened up their wallets and said, you can take one of our players, just one, to join the Dockers to get them over the hump, to get them to finals, and maybe even push them into a chance for a flag. Who's
Man,
the one guy you bring west?
one one guy, man. Um, and it's so hard, Donnie, because right now I'm so invested in these groups of players.
Hmm.
These we've really got some great guys up forward now, and that's always been the knock on Fremantle is just not enough presence on the forward line, particularly your talls, to really make a whole lot of impact. Um, I would have said probably somebody like Tom Papley or Charlie Curnow in the past, might have made a big difference now. But we've got a lot more presence on our front line now. Luke Jackson is there. We've got uh, we've got Jai Amos. He is growing in stature and size. I mean, 2 years ago he looked like a twig. Now he is a man. He is a monster, and it's making a big difference having guys with size down at the sticks, to, if nothing more, provide that structure, as they say, to get the ball to some of their speedy forwards to get in place. So, um, and it's also hard for me to say, oh, let's pick a midfielder. Because isn't that basically what Fremantle does every year? Is they're always picking up a midfielder here and a midfielder there, and oh, this midfielder wants to come. Why don't we bring him along for the ride and see how he pans out? So I would think really, maybe somebody along the back line, um, and somebody that doesn't mind getting his nose dirty. Maybe a James Sisley
Hmm.
from Hawthorne. That's the kind of guy that I'd like to see with the Dockers, because he can bring it out of the back. He can shut you down. He would really be an impact player on the back end, and he could move it out to that midfield and get it moving in the other direction. Plus, he really knows how to get under the skin of his opposition. So I kind of like that side of him as well. So
Hmm.
if there's one guy, I would probably say James Sicily. Now, one guy that really has flown under the radar and showed himself last season, but no one sees him play because he plays at the Gold Coast, Sam Flanders. That
Hmm.
guy is just constant motion. He can play anywhere on the field and make an impact. So that's one of those versatile players that I think that if you need to plug a hole, you can put him almost anywhere except up front, up forward. But
Hmm.
other than that, I like his versatility. But for the Dockers, I think long term, a nice stern defensive presence in the back would probably help them more than anything. So James
Hmm.
Sicily for me.
I think that would be a fantastic pickup for Fremantle if that happens. So, as I tell a lot of people on this podcast, I am a huge supporter of AFLW and women's footy. So I'm interested, sir, as a Fremantle supporter, do you keep track of the women's? And if you do, thoughts on this last season? And if you don't, what can the AFLW do to maybe get your attention to watch more women's footy?
Right now, I've been more ardent a supporter early on. When I was really on fire for it. The frustrating part about the Dockers is, as it seemed in many years for the men's team, you fall in love with players and then they go away. When I first came in, some of the best players on the Dockers were Gemma Houghton and
Mhm.
Sabrina Duffy, uh, Cara Antonio, all gone. Sabrina, went to Melbourne, and Gemma went to Port Adelaide, and I don't think either one of them have really been seen since. Cara Antonio, I hear her on I think it's ABC telecasts from time to time doing men's AFL commentary games. So I'm glad to see that she's out representing Western Australia and doing a great job there. But and then last year, Turbo Kiara Bowers missed the whole season because she's becoming a mom. Great
Mhm.
for her. Sucks for the team because, man, I would have loved to have seen her out there last year. And even then, it seems like that you think that these girls really overachieved with all of that they had, that are essentially going away from a team that, during the pandemic, I feel like they missed out on an opportunity for a flag. They
Mhm.
were the
I
top of
agree.
the ladder and did not get an opportunity to play a grand final because of the pandemic. There were a lot of Frio fans that do feel like that those girls got robbed of an opportunity
Mhm.
that they're going to have a very difficult opportunity replicating. So
Mhm.
missed opportunity sucks for us, but it it's been great though to see a lot of these new recruits come in and fill those shoes. And it was, I think, making the semis this year was a bit more than the Frio faithful were really expecting out of that women's team. We'll take it because, these girls have got something going on. They believe, but it's going to take more than just belief to beat that North Melbourne crowd. They
Hmm.
are a machine,
Hmm.
and it's going to be very hard for them to overcome that. But somebody's going to do it one of those days. Why not us?
Hmm.
But but I say that, I say that to say this: I probably should support them more. Meaning, if I'm staying up in the middle of the night at 2 and 3 in the morning to watch the men's game, am I as committed to the women's game if I wait until 8 o'clock in the morning to watch the replay?
Hmm.
That's, I'm and why do you want to be awake at 2 o'clock in the morning if you're on the other side of the world? Because you want to interact with your Frio faithful. You want to be a part of your fan base. You want to know what they think about what's going on. And if you're not awake at that time, sure you're watching the game, you're keeping up with it, but you're not as connected to that community as you could be if you're awake at that hour. Um, just didn't have the energy to do it after a 22-week long season in AFL, and now AFLW is basically tacked on to the end now. Just didn't have the energy. Plus, American football starts up about that time as well, and you know that I'm a pretty hardcore East Carolina and Tarboro High School football, so I'm always engaged in that sort of thing. So it makes it a lot more difficult, but um, I'm always doing what I can to try to stay connected as best I can with the Frio faithful because one of these days I've got to get there. I've got to see the game for myself. And I think that was probably one of your leading questions is have you been there? And the answer is God, I want to, but not yet. Not yet. So that's if I can't be there, at least I can talk to the people who were there.
Hmm. No, 100% with you. I think another, just to add on to it, the fact that Fremantle did all of this while also losing Anya Tighe and there for a while. Anya Tighe was the offense for Fremantle for the
Yeah.
women's team. So when she went down, I along with many pundits thought, okay, well, there's Fremantle's season down the tubes as soon as Anya
hmm
Tighe went down. But they found a way. They kind of did the next woman up type of mentality and really kind of did well. And then to go off what you said, Turbo isn't there. Ange Stannett also didn't play at all this particular season due to an ACL injury, and you lose Anya Tighe. So for me, I think Fremantle's a dangerous team going into next year's AFLW because you bring back those three absolute superstars back into this team that got into a finals that I think most people, if you ask most people, Fremantle got there by a little bit of shock and awe. Again, you also got to look at it too. I think Geelong probably should have made it. They got a little bit in they got a little bit hosed a little bit when it came to the fixture, the issue with 11 games, but we won't go there. As you kind of said, you already jumped the gun with the next one. My next question is, have you ever been to Australia? So I ask this, sir, if you can, is it something that's on the horizon, or is it still something that we're kind of put in the background till the finances are just right?
Well, I think the finances are fine, but right now it's very difficult with the work environment because I'm in banking, and the banking job, while it gives you bankers holidays occasionally, one Monday every other month, it
Hmm.
doesn't afford you enough time to get to Australia and back.
Hmm.
So if you're going to go, you really have to commit yourself to a solid block of 2 weeks. And unfortunately, I'm really the only one in my house that's gung ho about wanting to go to Australia.
Hmm.
And it's me, my wife, and my two daughters. One is going to be 12 this Sunday. One just turned 9. So it's difficult to leave all that at home.
Hmm.
So it's probably going to be a little ways out in the future. not because of lack of desire, not because of lack of funds, but the family situation right now just isn't such that, I mean, they want to go and spend all their time in Orlando
Hmm.
and go to Disney or go to Universal or go to SeaWorld or go to the beach or visit places locally where they can do more. They have no desire really to sit on a plane for 16 hours both ways.
Hmm.
So that's going to be I'll have to develop that interest if we're ever going to get down there. But it will happen one day. I can assure you because it's not something that's debating at this point.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm literally all in on cricket during the summer, during the Australian summer as well. So literally, I'm constantly, footy season ends, then you start up the ODIs, and then you got the Test series, and then it's you're just constantly in some sort of Australian sport during that time, and BBL. Perth
Hmm.
Scorchers had a down year this year, but I mean they were on top and winning their premierships the previous season. So
Hmm.
I've gotten really excited about watching the cricket as well. So that's really good. Whenever the Ashes shit series happens, that's always fun for me
Hmm.
because it's I kind of feel like an honorary Aussie anyway, and who who loves sticking it to the Palms better than the Aussies do. So
I love it.
yeah.
I find it interesting because you have your purple thing. I'm surprised you're not a Hobart Hurricanes fan. Which
Well, no, once I'm stuck in Western Australia, I think
kind of
that
stayed there. Okay.
and there's a part of me that really kind of relishes the idea of Perth
Hmm.
being the most remote city on the face of the planet. I mean, you literally have to drive what 18 or 20 hours to get to the next um, metropolitan city anywhere. It's this really long expanse to get there, and there's something about living basically out on the edge of nowhere that kind of appeals to me. Who knows? One of these days, maybe I'll just get my passport and see if I can just be gone, be gone, America, for a whole footy season. There you go, 22 weeks of football. That's really what I want.
Well, and the best part, if you stay out in Perth, you got the wall. You can keep track of the waffle too, which is some darn good football out there too. I would definitely say
Yeah, it
that for
is.
sure. So
Absolutely.
so let's jump to it. So I want to have some fun with this because I always like it. Is that again, us American sports people, we love our food at our sporting events because it's more entertainment than it is just purely being a fan. So I ask this: when you go over, is there something when it comes to food items that you want to try when you go and watch a game go and see a game of football?
Well, the classic is the Aussie meat pie,
Hmm.
but I've already had two different flavors of Aussie meat pies. I've been to the Kookaburra compound in St. Augustine's, Florida, with three locations, one to serve you. They serve the meat pies, and they have the big they have Kookaburra um, coffee mugs, and you can get a flat white there, and all over the place. There's just all sorts of Australian memorabilia all over the walls and such as that, and it's a really it's an odd place. St. Augustine is like the oldest established city in the American on this continent anyway. Not the obviously there were the islands were more populated, but on the actual mainland, St. Augustine's is like the oldest established city in the United States, and to have three restaurants in St. Augustine that kind of cater to Aussie cuisine was very interesting to me. So I had to make a stop by there to see what that was all about. And my meat pie was very good, and I hear from some of the folks at the footy that the meat pies that they're served at the footy are a bit overrated. You want to get the homemade versions from the
The
old moms and
bakeries.
pops
Yeah.
that actually make them fresh. You don't want the ones that they're heating up in a toaster oven at the footy. You want
Hmm.
something that's authentic. So,
Yeah. The
and
four
I
and
think
20
that's what
pies.
I got. Yeah, you don't want the 4 and 20 pies. That's basically just a that's basically the frozen frozen concoction you pull out of the freezer and pop into the toaster oven or whatever to make. But
Mhm.
if you want the real thing, you want somebody that does it right.
Yeah, some of those Aussie bakeries are absolutely fantastic. So along with going to the game, along with the food, you got to have the seat. And for me, the fascinating part is the multi levels. So especially say Optus Stadium, if you get out to Western Australia, like I know you want to, where do you think is the ideal place to sit? Where's the one place you see at Optus Stadium that you really want to sit down and watch a game of football?
That is such a hard question. And I've pondered over it because if you're in America, you want to be close to the 50-yard line as possible.
Hmm.
And me, I like to be low where I can see what's going on the sidelines and that sort of thing. But I've never actually been at an Australian rules football game, and you look at the dimensions, and it's just huge. And what you don't really see a whole lot in their bench areas, except guys are getting their legs massaged and whatnot. And there's not a whole, there's only four guys over there that are sitting on the side. Well, I guess five if you count the sub, but
Hmm.
there's only five guys and coaches over there. So there's not a whole lot interesting over there to really take your mind off of. And the game's always moving. So I think my instincts would be that you want to be, in the middle so you can see both ends. But I'm telling you, I can't imagine going to a footy game and not being a part of that cheer squad in the end, behind the sticks, with
Hmm.
all the pom poms and the flags and all of the signs and everything. Those look like the crazy people that I would want to sit with.
Hmm.
And I don't see that they would be at midfield. They're the ones that are down there causing chaos on the boundaries, and I kind of like that as well. So I'm a little torn. As a student of the game, I'd like to be able to see more of what's going on, but at the same time, I know those people on the ends are having a lot of fun too.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's one of those. There isn't really a bad seat. So, but it
I
just
can
kind of like I said,
imagine so.
it's more of the atmosphere. Is like what from the people that I talk to is like if you want that fan atmosphere, the cheer squad is absolutely the place to be. But if you want to watch the game and be able to just enjoy the movement and everything like that. I've heard a lot of people second layer on the wing to close to midfield is probably perfection because you can pretty much see everything. Sometimes they turn into ants when they're in the far part of the field, but it's at least close enough. So, and then I always end my particular podcast with this question. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen, whether it was live, whether it was on delay on the Watch AFL app, favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
We may have to edit. We may have to edit because this might be a long thing. It's really hard for me though to get away from that Fremantle St Kilda from 2005 where Longmuir kicks after the siren, but
As long as we can mute Eddie.
and yeah,
I'm
and
sorry.
it just there's just something about it. It was quite the comeback to begin with, and then to see just the crazy humanity afterward. Um, Another fun one that I really love is David Mundy after the siren against Richmond at the
Mhm.
MCG. That one, unfortunately, that was also another Eddie McGuire call. Um, but again, if it's a game that you could actually be at, I think that would have been a really fun game to be at as a Fremantle supporter, probably outnumbered greatly at that particular time, it would have that would have probably been one of those fun ones to walk away from. Um, but yeah, I'm talking about a lot of the old games right now that really I'm just living for that that grand final that we finally pull it through.
Mhm.
So I'm looking forward rather than backward. Um, because when you look back as a Frio fan, there's a whole lot of um, disappointment and heartache when you look in the rearview mirror because every one of those great games there was a fail somewhere along the way that left you brokenhearted at the end. So my favorite game is probably the one in the future where we finally break for but we finally through and flag mantle becomes a reality for all of the downtrodden in Western Australia that have been waiting for that purple haze to rise. That's what they're looking for, and that's what I'm open.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too. As somebody that loves seeing parity in a league, I really, really hope that that happens, especially considering I have a very, very well loved and well liked Frio Dockers fans in my life, including yourself, Gil Griffith, and a few others that I love talking with. Some of you guys are some of the most awesome people. So, Lee, that is it. That is all my questions. I was thoroughly looking forward to this chat because I know you, like I said. We've mentioned it a few times. We've played fantasy footy together for this will be our fourth season together, fourth or fifth season playing footy together, fantasy footy, and it is so much fun. You're such an engaging, and you have a great footy mind. I sometimes I baffle. I mean, this is how good this guy is. I think he's only finished second or below in every single fantasy footy league during the regular season. This guy literally kicks our butts every year. He's that good. So it's so much fun to go back and forth. So I had to have him on as one of my Fremantle Docker supporters. So Lee, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Well, you know the drill. You know how I like my multiplayers.
Yep.
You've got to have a player that you've got to have as many players that are not just good, but you can put them in multiple positions. It's
Hmm.
if they're a forward mid or if they're a mid defender or if they're a ruck forward. You got to have the ability to move around because you're never going to go through a full footy season with a healthy fantasy team. You've got to have some flexibility there. So
Hmm.
it's honestly, I'm not the best at picking AFL players. It's just a strategy that I've used from the beginning. That flexibility has always kind of helped. But you know, I wouldn't say that if the team play the players that I pick would probably make a pretty shitty AFL team if you put them all together, quite honestly. Because everybody would be like trying to do each other's role because they don't have defined roles. Well,
Hmm.
that's the secrets, whatever, to AFL fantasy football is do your best to not pick up a true full forward because they don't get any points. You've got to get a
Or if you're
forward
going
that's also a mid.
or if you're going to pick a full forward when they're playing a team that gives up like when you captain Jeremy Cameron when they play North Melbourne and he kicks 8 goals that week and goes for 144, or you pick up a Ben King from St. Kilda just before they go and play Richmond and he kicks seven in a row. That's when it's perfect. But most of the time, every other day, sometimes you got to be careful because, as you said, the big full forward trap sometimes can really bite you. So.
But Donnie, my God, it's like picking stocks at that point.
Pretty
It's
much.
gambling. If what you want is somebody that's going to give you consistent points every week,
Yep.
and those full forwards just don't do that. You always have to, and that's just the strategy. And again, I'm giving up my secrets, but it's not like it takes an idiot to figure these things out. I've only been watching AFL for full time for what, 4 years?
Mhm.
I think you could probably figure this out. And you are the one, the thorn in my side when it comes to fantasy footy. But
Twice.
hey, I love you, brother. I love you. I appreciate you having me on, and for all of my Aussie friends out there, on you, mate.
Yep, absolutely love it. That'll be it for this particular podcast. It's been so much fun. Again, if you like what you are listening to, please like and subscribe. Keep track of it. We are getting closer and closer to the AFL season, which also means state league footy is closer and closer. Keep an eye out as in the next few months, we will see previews and then the normal reviews for all of that. So that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. We will be back with more footy coverage very, very soon.